I like we should do this more often. And we are live. Hi, Internet. My name is Pyotr, and I'm with Konstantin. Konstantin, you are a man of many talents, I think, and many experiences. And this is our first live stream together, which I'm very excited to be doing. And well, we've had you on the channel. We've had a chat a few days ago, which will be up on my channel in a few days. But I thought it'd be nice to talk to you in real time so that people who are watching this on my channel or on my Twitter or will be viewing it later from your community could sort of, engage directly. And also because it's just, I don't know, streaming is fun, isn't it? How are you getting on at the moment?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. Streaming is fun. I like live streaming. I do that daily, nightly, should I say. Let's do it.
Yeah, well, you've got a very sort of atmospheric background relative to my sort of beige couch. So I never know what time of day it is because it's always very atmospheric where you are. But I think,
Pyotr, it'll come to you. It'll come usually. It comes after stream number 600 or 700. Just
600.
keep on doing it, and it'll come to you.
Yeah, well, no, for sure it will. But we've got a little community already. So I think one of the things I was curious to chat with you a little bit at the moment is obviously Syria. We touched upon it at the end of our initial conversation, but it looks like Russia really is pulling out of Syria now, but they're going to keep their bases there somehow. They're going to keep the bases that are under the control of the HTS-led coalition and somehow negotiate diplomatically, which is not, I think, the Kremlin's forte, to keep them there and have a presence in the warm water ports. So is this just an illustration that Putin has his hands tied and he has to play the geopolitical game a little bit?
How do you know that Russia is going to keep their bases there? Where do you get your information from?
Because they're not fully pulling out yet. Satellite imagery indicates that they're still docked outside of the two main bases. And there are insinuations from what I've heard from friends I have in the area that there is the likelihood the Russians won't have to move completely out.
According to Reuters, they are pulling out of Hamimim Air Force Base right now, or at least they have started the process. And I think at this point, it's really no one can say that they're going to keep the bases or they're going to pull out completely. I think that situation is being developed right now, and anything can happen. But from what I understand, they're moving a lot of hardware and people to Libya, which is very surprising because Libya is very unstable state in terms of there's not one single government that you can make a deal with and be sure that the deal will be honored. Okay. So I think what they're doing right now is an act of desperation. They would either move back to Russia, which is a complete disaster, geopolitical disaster, a loss, or they try to keep their bridge to Africa. And then Libya, well, it's better than nothing. Let's put it this way.
They have a few options. I can't see them personally moving all the way around to the northern ports in the Baltics or even in the Arctic. I think it's a logistical nightmare, but also strategically a complete and utter, well, it's not even a crisis, it's a disaster, I think, for Russia's sort of down there. But they have, I mean, Libya is still in a state of flux. If anything, I think it's still going to be worse off than Syria in terms of how much it's deteriorated since Gaddafi was ousted. But then there's also Djibouti, which could potentially be leveraged. I know the Russians have a minor presence there, but and their relationship with the Egyptians is complex. I know Egypt has its unique relationship with the Americans, but I think the Russians are, well, it's a desperation, that's for sure. And they have very limited options. Maybe you could see them trying to wangle something with Algeria, but there's very limited options. The Moroccans are a major non-NATO ally, so that's out of the question. So yeah,
I think no matter what they do, what they're doing right now, they have lower hand in negotiations because they're negotiating out of desperation, and everyone knows that. Okay. And even if they find refuge, that's going to be on certain terms not that favorable to Russia. When Russia was establishing the bases in Syria, that was absolutely a different situation. Putin had an upper hand, so things change.
And what's your sort of general sense about the Turkish relationship there? Because Turkey is unquestionably the regional winner, but at the expense of which country most? Largely Russia, right? So how do you think those two are going to engage?
It's very
because also Turkey is
complex.
very influential in Uzbekistan.
Definitely.
Yeah,
And not just in Uzbekistan, but Turkey is trying to extend its influence over the Central Asia. There is, I can't say rumors because I think it's true. Of course, it's unofficial, but Recep Erdogan wants to be remembered as a person who extended Turkish influence, all over this part of the world. He's trying to establish, in Russian it's called Pan-Turksky Mir, a pan-Turkish world, rebuild the Turkish Empire, or at least restore parts of it. Okay, and the Central Asia is definitely the land that he's looking at. And I know for sure the Turks are very active in Uzbekistan. They are active through investments, kind of soft expansion. They're competing with the Chinese, obviously, and with the Saudis. I've been trying to break into the market of building power plants. That's what I did in Russia. And I know the situation quite well in the power facilities construction industry. And Turkish are very, very strong here. They have a very strong presence. Russian-Turkish relationship, I think that the Turks have always been very pragmatical, okay, and they never reached out as the friends of Russia. There was never friendship from the Turkish side, only interests. When the interests were similar, then there was a relationship with Russia. But I mean, look what happened in the past. Russian warplane was shot down back in 2014, I believe. And, Russia nearly went to war with Turkey over that. Putin didn't speak to Erdogan, and this crisis in the relationship between two countries, all flights were canceled to Turkey from Russia, and the tourists were discouraged. I think the travel agencies were forbidden to, take tourists into Turkey. So it was a huge cool down in the relationship, and look what happened. Putin and Erdogan started talking again only after Putin saved Erdogan's life, basically. Okay, and there was a warming in the relationship, and then, of course, after the war, look what happened. Another cool down, and at this point, Turkey has expanded into Syria at Russia's expense. So I don't, I don't know what to tell you. This relationship is non-existent right now. Basically, that's it. Pyotr, are you there? Looks like we lost Pyotr. Interesting. Anyway, I'll continue on Syria. What's happening in Syria for Russia is the end of the era of having strong presence in the Middle East. Putin is done. I think he knows that, and everyone knows that. So we'll see what they will come up, what kind of solutions they will come up very soon. Pyotr, you there? Okay, I'm seeing myself. Somehow we lost Pyotr. Okay. That's interesting. That's never happened before to me. Where is the host? Well, anyway, I wanted to tell you a little bit about what's happening in Russia with Syria. Russia established its bases in Syria in 2015, and it was quite an interesting development in the propaganda. All the propaganda started going on and on about how Syria was important for Russia, how it was crucial for Russian interests in the Middle East, how Russia had an obligation for Syrians to help Bashar Assad out and things like that. And I remember the talk shows, there were articles everywhere. Peter, while you were away,
you just carried on. It's very good. You're very experienced at live streaming, which is what I.
Yes, I'm telling how things changed in Russian society. The view of Syria has changed. That's important. So, when in 2015 Russia was entering Syria, it was hailed on every corner. Russia, it's in Russian interests. We're going to gain so much from Syria. We're going to help the Syrian brothers. We're going to benefit financially from it, or whatever reason, And now, 10 years later, the situation is completely different. Syria? Syria is not needed. It's useless. It's just a waste of our resources to be in Syria, Forget about Syria. Don't ever remember that. That was a mistake. Not a mistake, but it was just, it's useless. And it's amazing how they turned around 180%. It's absolutely amazing. Russian propaganda keeps amazing me, okay? Right now, I watch Russian shows every single day, and this attitude in propaganda it's good that we left Syria. It's no good for us. Who needs Syria? Syria? What is Syria? Is it a country on the map? Come on. It's crazy, So that's an important to know what's happening.
So firstly, sorry everybody about that. Secondly, I wasn't too worried because of your experience, your veteranism in streaming, Konstantin. So I was like, he'll just keep talking about something. He'll find a way to segue, pivot very smoothly into storytelling, and it's just what you did. No, I agree. I think that there is a large withdrawal happening within Syria from Russia. It's never really a relationship that you expect, but I think that's the case with many of Russia's quote unquote friends, right? They're not friendships based on shared values or exact same ideologies. They are marriages of convenience most of the time. I mean, the Chinese and the Russians are not exactly, I think, the most natural of allies, but the thing that unites them is their antipathy to the United States-led order. So yes, absolutely. But I still am skeptical to the extent that the Russians are just going to get up and leave everything from Syria. There was a question here from Dab, which was like, are they completely evacuating or consolidating one or two bases? I personally think it might be, I think they're going to try their hardest to try and keep some kind of presence in Syria. Because to the second part of Dab's question, it's so important for their operations in Africa. And this is something you touched upon in our recording on Thursday, which is it's integral. It's a bit like the Diego Garcia base, which the British just handed back to the Mauritians about 2 months ago, because they use that base as a transit to bomb Afghanistan and Iraq from the United States for refueling. So this is incredibly important for the Russians, for Mali, the Sahel, etc. So you're still confident that they're going to have to pull out completely and somehow find a way to operate in Africa?
And I never said I am confident completely, because no one knows at this point. They will stay, at least partially, if they can find a way, buy their way in or negotiate their way in. But we just don't know what's going to happen. The country is in turmoil. There are different groups that are controlling Syria right now. Will
Right.
there be a civil war? Will they be fighting? Will they find a consensus? And will they come up with some kind of a unified government? Will be making decisions. At this point, it's still not clear, from what I understand. And then Russian presence there is also not clear. If they can, they will stay, but can they? Will be able to do that? We don't know. So we'll see.
Okay.
But I think time will tell very soon. It's a matter of weeks.
Yeah, and to your point about the Turks and the Russians in Russia's backyard or the near abroad of the Central Asian countries or stand states, I think that's really interesting because Erdogan has been getting very sort of confident, shall we say. He's been flexing in that part of the world as well. And whilst, Tokayev, the current leader of Kazakhstan, has been more willing, I think, to play ball with Moscow. A couple of the other countries haven't. I mean, what's your experience from Uzbekistan generally about sentiments towards Turkey versus Russia? Is there more favorability towards either country, or because Uzbekistan always stands out to me as a bit more of a anomaly in the Central Asia?
It is an anomaly. It is definitely an anomaly. It is part of the USSR, but for decades it has played the role of a sovereign state, and it's been navigating between three great powers: Russia, the USA, and China. And it's still doing it brilliantly. Kazakhstan is a part of the union with Russia, okay, and other republics are greatly influenced by China. I mean, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and also Russia. It's at battlefront between Russia and China. Okay, but Uzbekistan, it kind of stands alone. And you definitely can see the influence of, how things are played out. In Uzbekistan, great presence of the Chinese and the Turkish. And it's much stronger than in Kazakhstan, bigger presence of Russians. And Russian companies, there's simply Russia is losing its soft power expansion because it comes with money. Okay, you need investors come and start establishing companies and building infrastructure projects, power plants. I mean, the Turks, Uzbekistan is up for grabs as long as you have money. The Turks come with their own money, they finance their projects. The Saudis, the Chinese, Russians, no Russian money, because there's simply Russia has run out of money for one, and Russia is under sanctions. No one touches projects financed by the Russians or partially owned by Russian companies. And I mean, I've seen that happen. Okay. A design institute, a local design institute, is bought by a Russian company, and all of a sudden, a few contracts are taken away from it, stopped. The Turks say, well, we can't do that because we're going to get under sanctions, US sanctions. And it's not just in Uzbekistan, but in Turkey as well. And then there's people who were bought by Russians. They're like, well, wait a second, what do you mean? But that's what we mean. We're not going to touch you because you are under Russian sanctions. There's a huge construction project of copper smelter plant going on also. Big problems because a part of it is owned by a Russian company, and the foreign companies, contractors come in and they get burned because they're under threat of the Western sanctions from the USA, from Europe, for touching this project. So basically it's a big mess. This is what's happening in Uzbekistan. And Kazakhstan, things are a little different. Kazakhstan is historically closer to Russia, and Russian politicians have claimed that it's a done deal that Kazakhstan is going to be annexed. Gurulev, in private conversation was intercepted with another senator. He was saying that the decision was made at the very top to take care of Kazakhstan, so to speak. Medvedev today, who was in China, Then he gave an interview saying that Russia will have more territories very soon, new territories. So Kazakhstan is underlying, under a threat, let's put it this way. And it's historically been closer to Russia. So Uzbekistan has been balancing between the countries. For example, Putin comes to Uzbekistan, signs some intention agreement to build nuclear power plants of small capacity, and at the same time, Uzbekistan, a couple of weeks later, signs an agreement with the Americans to exchange customs information, which is, a huge blow to Uzbekistan-Russia relationship, because now the Americans have direct access to all customs operations, what is imported into the country, what's and exported to where, and then Russians can't use Uzbekistan to circumvent sanctions anymore, to shadow import, whatever they import into Russia, military, non-military stuff. So this is where Uzbekistan is standing. And other countries, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, they've fallen more over Chinese influence. And then Kazakhstan is trying to get rid of Russian influence, but it's really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, a bit of a personal anecdote, but the first country I ever visited was Kazakhstan. I was 7 months old. We flew to Antalya with my father on Aeroflot, I believe, because it was 94, and he was beginning to explore opportunities. He had moved to the UK in 1990 to be with my mother, who's English. They met in Moscow through very unique. So I could tell the love story sometime, guys, if you want. If you ever, when I do a personal live stream, but maybe I'll save that for 50,000 subs or something. But we went there, and I've been back, I think, once or twice again when I was like a little kid. So I know I've been to Kazakhstan, and then we took the train from Antalya to Novosibirsk, because my father's family lives or has been based around that. That's where he grew up. So I've always wanted to go back, sort of more now that I'm actually functioning as an adult and more aware of the geopolitical dynamics, to see the region. I think is it also Turkmenistan, the country that fascinates me, because it's largely closed to the globe. And you can't really get in. So that's another country that fascinates me. And I was actually going to be based, I had applied to a job at the UN to be based in Kabul on the UNAMA mission. But obviously when the Taliban retook the country 3 years ago, Uzbekistan was fascinating, because that's obviously where I think the head of the ex head of the country flew to. And there was this whole debate about whether America might start building up some military presence in Uzbekistan to try and counterbalance against the resurgence of the Taliban. So fascinating part of the world. And so you think that if Putin continues to try to press Kazakhstan, it could be deepened in the orbit of the Kremlin, so to speak? I feel that to bring in a bit of Ukraine, Putin has always wanted to try to emulate what Belarus is, right, with Ukraine. So could you see sort of Kazakhstan going that direction?
Well, it is a fact that Gurulov, he's the head of a committee for defense of Russian parliament. His telephone conversation with another pretty powerful man in Russia was intercepted and made public, and he was saying that the decision was made for Kazakhstan. It's only a matter of time. Russia is going to annex it. I think if they could, they would. The question right now is that does Russia possess enough might to do that? Russia has so many problems domestically. I'm studying these problems. I'm studying Russia. I'm looking at under microscope, and I simply don't see any possible way for Russians to expand anywhere. They can't even do anything in Ukraine. They push kilometer by kilometer, okay? And it's not like they don't want to and they're not trying. They have been trying real hard, and I'm pretty sure that the orders from the top come in like, you must take more land before we start negotiating with the Americans and so forth. But they can't. Kursk, for goodness sake, a part of Russia has been occupied by Ukrainian armed forces, okay, since August 6th. And what? It's been 4 months. So what? They can't even force Ukrainians, push them back into Ukraine. So I think it's premature to speak of Russia advancing, but Russia definitely under Putin would love to, if it had military might, geopolitical
Let me
might.
clarify what I mean.
Right.
No, let me clarify what I mean, because, you know, since '94, since Belarus was dominated by Lukashenko, it has had this unique political union with the Kremlin, right, with Russia. And it's sort of like a de facto extension of Russia. So what I wonder is whether or not Putin has wanted to try to emulate this with Ukraine, with Moldova, with Georgia, with Armenia, Kazakhstan.
But Putin has taken Belarus by force.
Well, it's still an independent country, no?
Well, no, not really. Because if you remember, when there were huge riots after the last presidential elections, when Lukashenko won by 105% of the votes, figuratively speaking, you know, and everyone wanted him out, okay? And then there were protests. They were peaceful protests, but the entire country was protesting. What happened? Lukashenko sold out to Russia. And then the Russian military, Russian Siloviki came in, and they started suppressing the protesters. And Russian propaganda came in. They took over as the entire Belarusian TV quit. Most of the staff, they said, we don't want to take part in this circus. And they quit. Okay, and the Lukashenko was losing. At one point, the protesters were closing in onto his castle, you know, his, whatever the Kremlin in Belarus is, in Minsk. But the Russians came in. And Russian propaganda people, they came in and they took over the television, the media, and they helped him out. And he's on the leash right now. So do they want to do something like that with Ukraine? Well, I think that's what the plan was, to get in, to install own president, loyal president, and to control the entire Ukraine by proxy. Same thing, they would love to do that with other countries as well. The question is, can they? Do they have enough resources? Do they have enough money? Do they have people? Oh, big question.
No, I think there's always a false, there's always a misconception that Putin. Well, I said it once in an interview, and someone was like, they weren't going to physically take the country. And it's like, no, that's not the point. The point is that you take control of key strategic strongholds, cities, obviously the capital. But the point was that they control Ukraine through a proxy. But my question to you on that point, though, is that other people believe that Lukashenko is actually more savvy than people give him credit for. And he's not just a puppet. He's largely a puppet of Putin, but he's also got his own degree of political survival instincts, which is why he's been able to stay in power. Will you disagree with that?
He's the best out them all, because he got into power when I think I still was in high school. And I've lived a very long life. Okay, he's one of the most successful dictators. Not only he became the president, he consolidated power, absolute power, and he became the dictator in, this all the power in his hands. He has managed to stay in power. And I remember there were a few attempts on his power back in 2000. That was such a long time ago. I don't remember. Either 2004 or 2005. Big protests in Minsk. And everyone thought, this is it. This is the end of Lukashenko, because people were so angry back then. Then 2020, was it 2021? It must have been, yeah.
2020, the election of 2020.
Yes. I remember him running around with AK-47 in his hands and bulletproof vest and the casque, the helmet, trying to protect his palace, So he's outsmarted, outslide everyone, including Putin. but he's still on the leash. Okay, in terms of he's more savvy than people think of him. Yes, I think so, very much so. But he's still on the leash of resources. He goes to Putin and he's on the leash. He needs money and he needs siloviki. That's, if it's not that, he'd be like Uzbekistan. He'd be navigating between Russia and the West, and he'd be sovereign, really sovereign. But he can't do that. But he's definitely the shrewdest, the slyest, the smartest dictator out of them all.
Yeah, thanks guys for drawing attention to John, by the way. He is no longer with us, at least in the chat. But yeah, aside from, you know, managing my stream chat, yeah, I think it's really interesting. I've never been to Belarus. I've been everywhere in Europe apart from a couple of countries, and Belarus is one of those places that I really want to go, but I'm also slightly conscious that because, well, like you said you had some operatives following you once. I'm worried that I might be focused on a bit.
Not once, more than once.
More than once. Oh, wow.
Yes.
But I remember because I was I'm in touch with Svetlana Thyslayenko, who is the political opposition to Lukashenko. Her husband was going to run against him in the election 4 years ago, and then he was imprisoned because of his political activism. So she ran instead, but she's been basically government in exile in Poland since then. And all she's seen by the Western countries is the, you know, legitimate opportunity for a more Western Belarus. But yeah, so there's that. So I also wanted to jump into a little bit more of the recent developments from your perspective. The US has signed this $500 million package, military aid package. What's your perspective on that? Is it going to make much difference? The Russians are still making minor gains on the eastern flank, but I never look at these, you know, additional fields and barns that they gain as some kind of massive strategic victory. It's not going to change the overall direction of the war. So I don't know. What's your sentiment about the latest aid from the US?
Well, I'm not a big expert on what's happening in the front lines. Okay, but generally from what I see, Russia cannot move forward. It cannot, you know, expand its presence in Ukraine. In the United States, the Democrats are on the way out, and I think what they're doing is they're trying to send as much help, assistance to Ukraine as possible before Joe Biden is out of the office.
Yeah,
because the fate of Ukraine is unclear at this point. I think this package make a big difference? Probably not, but they're trying to, you know, send as much as they can until it's over. And I think that's going to be stopped as soon as Donald Trump, you know, becomes the president.
Yeah, aside from our conversation that I'll probably release tomorrow for those who are interested, we had a recording with Konstantin on a slightly more different angle. We also had a chat with Jason J. Smart. Maybe you're familiar with him. He writes for the Kiev Post. Very active.
Yes. I am familiar. We communicated.
Yeah, he's a good chap. And we were talking a little bit about the signals. I'm not pretending to say that there's a U-turn. Obviously, in my title, it's a little bit provocative, but that's the name of that's the game of YouTube. But this idea that Trump might be coming round to actually not 100%. I don't think he's going to continue at the rate that Biden has been or is, but that he might be more willing to hear out Zelensky and Ukraine's perspective and not completely just defund and discontinue support. I think he's going to still pressure Kiev to negotiate or at least begin negotiations with Moscow, but I don't think he's going to be as hardline as we might have expected. Are you seeing that, or you disagree?
Oi, that is such thin ice that we start walking on. You see, what I really like to do on YouTube and in life is to monitor current developments, to see facts, and based on these facts, you know, details, big and small, I synthesize them, okay, and then I make my forecasts. But they're always based on something I know well. I am economist by trade, and I went to 2 schools in 2 countries, and then I got some post-degree education in economics, and I know what's going to happen to Russian economy. Okay, I knew the day Russian rockets started flying to Ukraine. I knew then, okay, and I said it right then, and we're seeing it coming, true right now, 2.5 years after. With Donald Trump, I absolutely have no clue, and no one does. This man is, we don't know much about him. He, we can see what he did as a president in the first 4 years, 2016 to 2020. He didn't do anything. He released javelins to Ukraine, and that's all I remember. Not much. There was a big scandal when he spoke to Zelensky. Conversation was then he spoke to his attorneys, and then he wanted to fire ambassador of the United States to Ukraine, and then it was a big scandal, and then he kind of distanced himself from Ukraine. He didn't speak to Putin once officially. He made promises, says, look, I'm going to negotiate. I'm going to make a deal with this guy, because you can make a deal with everyone. I clearly remember it was in 2016, a part of his campaign. He didn't do anything. He met Putin twice, but not was like specific meetings to meet 2 presidents to meet each other. But it was at G20, I believe, and they briefly spoke, and that was it. Okay. Will he do the same thing? We don't know. Has he come around? We're going to see that in about a month when he assumes the office. I'm pretty sure that he's going to do something on the very first day. He promised everyone, he promised Americans, the voters, he said, I'm going to stop that war in 24 hours. You know what? I'm waiting for him to stop the war 24 hours. And hey, Donald Trump, please perform a miracle. I've been praying for the war to stop for 2.5 years. It's going to be 3 years soon. So please stop it like you promised. But not selling Ukraine out, but in a way that is acceptable to Ukraine. That wouldn't be a miracle? Wouldn't you love that? Pyotr, I would. Will that happen? Yeah, will that happen? Highly doubt it,
well,
but we'll see.
Wait, are you saying it's not going to? But Trump said it will. So that means obviously, what you don't? Are you saying you don't believe Trump? Oh, I thought that was. I thought we were on the same page, right?
What I'm saying is, time will tell very soon. We don't have to wait for a long time. We will see very soon, and I simply have no facts. I have nothing to make my opinion on. This is going to be just me guessing, and anyone is guessing. Donald Trump might have turned around, might have come around. He might have not. We don't know. So I can't really answer your question. I am uninformed. I don't know. I have not met Donald Trump. I don't know the way he thinks. I don't think anyone does.
I guess, hey guys, I think that's basically, I think we've reached the end of the stream. I thought of what I knew about Konstantin's opinion of Trump and stuff. I obviously I had a very different impression there. No, we're not going anywhere, don't worry. But I'm very sarcastic, everybody. You'll have to get used to my delivery. I'm joking, but I think there is a couple of points here, which is that Trump.
Wait! Before you get to the points, can I say that some people I avoid U.S. politics. All right, I try to stay away from it because I'm not American. I'm not voter. I'm not taxpayer in the United States. But somehow, some people think I'm Trumpist, and some people think that I'm a liberal. Yeah, at the same time. So.
Oh well, I can relate to that. I'm what you call a radical centrist. I actually looked up this term a couple of weeks ago because I'm bang in the middle on most things. I'm much more progressive on sort of things like climate change, but on other things I'm quite traditional. So it depends. But sort of people have labeled me a NATO shill, a NAFO shill. I'm part of that community, or I'm a Vatnik. because I've sometimes alluded to, I'm speaking with a Russian, and just by speaking to a Russian, that makes me a Vatnik, or because I'm half Russian, I'm a Vatnik. You know what I'm a Russist. All these terms that the NATO camp use. So I'm labelled as well. It could be also on Israel, Palestine, or anything. I think the problem with the US politics is because it does transcend borders to such an extent, it affects us all. You can't not have an opinion about it to an extent. And that's sort of, this is where I'm curious about your thoughts, which is that Trump is illustrating to me, obviously I don't trust Trump, but I'm hoping, maybe naively so or ignorantly, that he's going to be different this time around. Because the first term, he didn't know what he was doing. And he had put in a lot of people who were, some of them were not as bad, some of them were quite terrible. But the second time around, he knows very much. I'm more worried about domestic US politics in some ways than I am American foreign policy in some ways. And I wonder whether or not some of the people he's putting around, like General Kellogg, right? He's a serious chap with some serious opinions about Putin and China as well. Marco Rubio, who I'm not exactly, he's not my favorite choice, but he's a seasoned politician who has some clearer ideas about foreign policy. I'm the nominee for the defense secretary. I forget his name. He was a concern for me. He's young. He's sort of impulsive. He lacks significant amount of understanding of the theaters around the world. Great power dynamics. So I'm hit and miss. Right? Is there anyone? Have you looked at the U.S. cabinet who's coming? Do you have any sense of who we should be most concerned about, or it doesn't matter? It's Trump. And
well, I looked at on the surface, but the thing is, I will look when all the members of the cabinet are appointed. Right now, it's just a talk, and there was a talk of Attorney General, and then the guy was withdrawn. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's too early to say. I don't even want to look at it, and I will definitely look when the cabinet is approved. Okay, everyone officially at their place. But this is where I agree with you. Donald Trump has come around in terms of now he's much more experienced. Okay, he made mistakes, and he got burned. Just like we're talking to Zelensky, Ukraine, and firing or intentions to fire, I don't remember, I think he fired the ambassador in Ukraine, and that definitely he's the guy who learns from his mistakes. And from what I understand, he's not going to go for the second term. So he said that I'm here for one term only. That takes pressure off him, political pressure, and if he wants to make to put a mark on the world, and he has a chance of doing it right now. He has a chance of stopping the war, but not selling out to Russia, but to making a deal that will satisfy Ukraine and will stop the war. Okay, that he has a tremendous opportunity to put his name into world's history. He might use this opportunity. I don't know, but I think that he's different. Is definitely different. How he has come around, we will see soon.
Yeah, and I think what people can get carried away with is, and I'm sort of reiterating it here because I think it's always incredibly important to bear in mind, which is that people hear what they want to hear often. And so because I'm sort of, we're trying to be open-minded to the potential Trump administration, doesn't mean it's an endorsement, right? I don't like Trump for overall foreign policy, but it doesn't mean that I think he can't maybe have changed in his overall approach to Ukraine. I still think he's going to push for some kind of deal, but I don't think it's going to be necessarily as, there was an article in Politico, for example, about 6 months ago, and they were writing about, it was maximalist scenario that Trump would defund NATO near completely. And sort of, withdrawing from NATO is largely quite difficult, a bit like trying to leave the EU, or, well, unless you're British. So it's quite hard to do, but you can defund it significantly. So I don't know. I think it's going to be really interesting. Do you think that if Putin tries too hard to cheat Trump, Trump is a very transactionalist. If he tries to cheat it, he could.
Of
Trump
course,
will
of course, of
punish him.
course. I think Putin is much slyer than Trump, and he will try to outsmart Donald Trump. Hey, just before I move further, there's a comment here from Maria Bankson. Konstantin, are you serious? And I've been listening to you. See, what I'm trying to say is, like, I don't know what's going on in the U.S. politics, and I'm waiting. In the month, we will all be seeing what's going to happen, what Donald Trump will do. Will he be good for America, bad for America? We don't know. Okay. And then a person writes, "Are you serious?" And I've been listening to you. Well, that's exactly what I meant. I'm not Trumpist. I don't support Donald Trump. I'm really disgusted at what Joe Biden did by pardoning his son. I think it's a very wrong thing to do. But I am a Konstantinian. This is my party of one. I stand by my values. Okay, I'm not Republican. I'm not Democrat. I don't support Trump. I don't support the Democrats, whoever. But then somehow I still get a reputation. I can't believe you're saying that. Saying what? That I'm not making my opinion on the politicians in the USA, and I judge them by their actions. That's what I like to see, by their real policies, and we are yet to see that. But anyway, what's going to happen? What's going to happen with negotiations? This is my take. Okay, Russia needs to control Ukraine. Oh, this Putin, that's his desire. He wants to control entire the country. He doesn't not need territories. He could care less. Ukraine is the prize, the entire country. He can do that by installing proxy or by influencing new administration that is pro-Russian. Putin cannot allow Ukraine to get some kind of military guarantees from the West. If Ukraine was to become a part of NATO, that would put big, cross onto Putin's plans. So this is what Putin is going to be doing. He's going to be negotiating some kind of a peace agreement that would allow him to continue destroying Ukraine, not militarily, but from the inside. Because there are a lot of agents of influence in Ukraine from Russia. And I'm pretty sure that the KGB will have priority number one set for Ukraine. Okay, they will be trying to influence, they will be trying to rock in the country. And there are many ways how to do that. Okay. And I think the main point here is guarantees. If the West somehow secures that Russia will leave Ukraine alone, then it's a win for Ukraine. But I don't see how that's going to happen. Again, I'm waiting and I'm seeing it. I'm prepared. I monitor. I understand that each side right now, at least Russia, is trying to get as much Ukrainian land, as much influence as leverage for the negotiations that are upcoming. Headwinds just served a big blow in Syria, okay, and that's also going to count at the negotiations. This is what I think. But Putin will be doing everything to outsmart. And the biggest trap right now I'm seeing is that the USA, don't know who's going to be. Is it going to be Donald Trump or his advisors or, the Americans? They will try to achieve quick victory and then present it as a victory of Donald Trump to the voters, saying, look, I promised you peace in Ukraine. This is the peace. And everyone will be hailing. But that could be shallow peace. That could be an opportunity for Russia to keep on influencing, keep on getting inside Ukraine, perhaps in another way, to trying to change the society, trying to change the government and so forth. So that's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, there's a lot. I think it makes me think of when Putin first started this. Obviously, it's what we go back to at the beginning of our chat, which was that I believe, and I think you're largely in agreement, that it was to not physically control and occupy the country, but to control parts of eastern Ukraine and force the removal of Zelensky and installation of someone who was more Russia-aligned, a Belarus 2.0. When that didn't become the case, I personally have always been of the belief that Putin's intentions were to try to control as much of the former, Novorossiya or New Russia, which, imperialist Russia controlled in the late 19th century, around the 1880s, something like that, turn of the 20th century, because they controlled all the way down to Transnistria and Moldova. And essentially, by doing that, what does that give Putin? It gives him the ideological control over Russians in, Ukraine. It gives him absolute control of the Black Sea. It gives him access to much more, very abundant areas of eastern Ukraine and south, potential gas fields, which are on the western south coast. I think near Odessa, there's been suggestions that there's a lot of gas down there. And also, it turns Ukraine into a rump state. This small Jake Bro was on the channel. We've had him on, and him and I have agreed on the idea of this rump state, this leftover bit of Ukraine, which is not really very useful to anyone. A bit sort of what happened to Bulgaria after the First World War. It was much bigger, and then the colonialist powers ate it up as punishment for their support to the Germans. So I think that was always Putin's sort of subsequent plan, but he's not really been able to achieve that. So now it's a case of trying to maximize what he can between here and Trump. But as I say, I'm still skeptical that really he's going to stop. Right. This is the next question. I was curious for your thoughts, which was about sort of a DMZ, right? This demilitarized zone, because JD Vance, Trump's VP, has suggested the idea of a demilitarized zone. Couple of points with this, though, is one, a DMZ in Ukraine along the current line of contact is about 3 times, more or less, the size of the one in the Korean Peninsula. It's like 500 kilometers in the Korean Peninsula. It's about 1,500, 1,800 in Ukraine. It's insanely bigger. Who's going to manage that? Are the Russians going to agree to that? No. And also, and most importantly, can the Ukrainians guarantee that the Russians won't, in the next, 10 years, 5 years, seriously remilitarize? I don't know what Putin comes after Putin, but, let's say he wants to try again by 2032 or something, that they just try this again. So how can the Ukrainians have that assurance? They can't. So what they join NATO? Well, the Russians aren't going to agree to that. So how do they securitize that DMZ? What troops, what countries help defend Ukraine from this happening again as a precaution, right? I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense, but these are the sorts of things that have gone through my mind.
That makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. This is what I'm saying. You can come to a different agreement. There are different possibilities. Demilitarized zone, Russia withdrawing completely from Ukraine, which is unlikely, but it's a possibility. Or Russia staying where it is right now. That is not the key. The key is who and how and what guarantees Ukraine that Russia will not make any further attempts in the future to either invade it or destabilize from within. And that is the key point. And how? I don't know. We will see in 1 month. That's my point exactly. We are sitting here and making guesses. Some educated guesses or uneducated guesses. We have no clue. And guess what? No one does. If they tell you that they know, that could only be Donald Trump or, the generals in the U.S. Army. That's it. No one else knows how things are going to turn out. That's pretty much. I saw a comment here. Someone says, Konstantin, you think we in Europe don't understand? We don't know that? I think in Europe people know that, but the politicians might be playing a different game. We will see soon. Okay, as soon as these negotiations start, I definitely will be on top of them. I will be monitoring, covering, informing my viewers of what's going on. And when I have facts in my hand, then I will make not guesses, but forecasts based on those facts.
I think that some of this isn't only speculation. I think it's the degree of forecasting. At the end of the day, a country, a head of state, has to be somewhat proactive, right? It's the Israelis, for example, and this is not necessarily an endorsement, but they have decided to take what's known as preemptive self-defense, right? So if people watch my video on Israel from a few days ago, there's a theory in international law, military law, which is that you have it's a spectrum, right? And you react. Someone attacks you militarily, then you react, and that's justifiable self-defense. But you have another spectrum part of it, which is before someone attacks you, you've got preeminent self-defense. The idea that Israel, in this example, are taking out military targets, strategical assets that they deem HTS or the rebels could potentially use against them in some future scenario where they've decided to attack Israel for whatever reason, right? So in this regard, do you not think that there is a little bit of that well, Ukraine is trying to attack Russia in both a reactive but also preeminent sort of proactive sense to try to prevent them from attacking them in ways that they think they could in the future?
I think I missed a little bit. Are you talking about Kursk province?
Yeah, Kursk, but also military assets further into Russia, closer to Moscow, in Rostov as well. They've done that.
Obviously, military targets all over Russia. And they also they have been bombing oil refineries, oil bases to cripple logistics to the Russian armed forces, obviously. I mean, that's a strategy of the war that Ukraine has. There's not much to discuss there. It's a fact.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is that you don't want to speculate on things that haven't been, but at the same time, you have to make certain decisions sometimes ahead of all the facts being there, because if you are always choosing inaction, then you might be caught with your pants down, right? Sometimes you have to act ahead.
I don't quite understand. Ukrainians are at war. Of course, they have to take actions. Their life is one continuous action. But it's us. We're sitting here. We can speculate. The thing is, to make forecasts, we need to know some facts to base. What are we going to base our forecasts on? At least I don't have anything to base mine. Perhaps you or other analysts, you have something tangible, but I don't. Israel is a little different. Israel has a history of dealing with its enemies, and we can forecast based on that history of previous conflicts. Okay. But Ukraine and Russia, it's something, and Trump getting in the middle is at least, I'm sorry, I can't forecast. There are different scenarios. Yes, there are, but which one is going to materialize, that I don't know.
No, for sure. I think there's a difference. It's a delicate difference, but I think that sometimes it's, well, in my line of work, I mean, I've worked in the UN, I've worked in organizations where you've had to make policy recommendations based on forward-looking situations, not necessarily based on having all the situation, because if you don't act beforehand, it could be much worse. The situation in, say, Haiti, it's completely unrelated to what we're mainly talking about, but there is a situation in Haiti which is terrible, right? And the UN is trying to find a way to react to that, not react, but preemptively do something to minimize the destruction that has already happened. It's a country in a state of anarchy. That's all I'm saying. But no, I get it. We're two guys sitting on the internet. I mean, I personally think you do more than you give yourself credit for, but I think you have more sway in the minds of people. So I don't know what's okay. Let's as we begin to wind down for our chat, I guess, what would you look ahead to? What would you recommend people to look out for? And if anyone wants to ask a question or have any thoughts, then drop a comment before we in the last little segment with Konstantin. But I don't know, what are you looking out for this week? Next, by the end of
you're asking me or you're asking your viewers?
Oh well, actually, viewers, yeah. What do you think? Both, but I want to hear from you.
Well, I'm definitely monitoring Russia because we have entered the last it's not even the quarter, the last 2 weeks of the year, and that's crucial time in Russian economy. Always. In the peaceful times, it was, because right now we're going to see a lot of action from the Russian government. We're going to see spendings skyrocket in the last 2 weeks, because the federal budget, they wait until the last week usually, and then they spend the remaining, they cover the expenses. So we're going to see the budget deficit jump, my estimation, between 6 and 6.5 trillion rubles. And that's going to shock everyone in Russia. And I'm definitely want to see the faces of the economists and the pundits and the likes. Then I'm seeing key interest rate in Russia going up. The question is it going to be raised to 23 or 25%? Okay, so there's no question in my mind it's going to be raised. There are a lot of interesting developments. People stopped getting paid. They start taking their anger to the streets. That is the first signs of big trouble that will be spread all over Russia. There's first food rationing introduced in Russia this week. I'm definitely going to be looking into that. Everything reminds me of the Soviet economy. Well, not everything, but a lot of things remind me of Soviet economy back in the 80s, when it was still going okay, but then it started kind of, before Gorbachev came into power, it started hiccuping and started country's economy got feverish, and things started falling apart real fast in front of my eyes. Okay, so this is what I'm going to be looking at. I'm not going to be looking at the U.S. administration, potential nominees. Like I said, I'll wake up, 20th of January, and I will see what happens, or 15th or whatever, when everyone will be actually placed and approved in their seats. That's my plan.
So you don't think General Winter is going to have any role?
It is not only I think it's going to have a role, it has been having a role. The city of Novosibirsk is being hit hard right now. There are dozens of apartment buildings, including sky rises, that are sitting without heat, and wind chill is minus 23 right now, minus 17 Celsius right now, or it's about 0 Fahrenheit. So, and that does not add to stability in Russia, political stability, economic stability. Novosibirsk is hit hard for the second time this winter, or it was hit in November, in the fall. I definitely expect a lot of fails throughout the country in the utilities. Hey, I was in the utility business for 20 years. I was building power plants. I understand what Siemens leaving and taking its engineering department out of Russia means for Russian power plants who have Siemens turbines installed and working. Companies cannot procure spare parts for their turbines, and basically the turbines are spinning until they break down. And they're going to be breaking down when it's going to be the coldest. Because there'll be, that's when the much pressure is applied on them. So I definitely wait for that.
I think each winter has been a level up from the first one. When the Dacha season comes to an end in Russia, it's always, oh boy, we've got winter setting in, and Russia wants to consolidate as much of its lines before they hold them for the winter. But now we've got that added addition of Trump and trying to consolidate the lines. So yeah, I think it's going to be incredibly challenging. My extended family, some of them do live out in Novosibirsk, so I'm very privy to the situation out there in terms of access to heating, electricity, and so on. And I remember being there in the 90s, early 2000s, and we were there for Christmas, New Year, and I think one winter it got like the snow. I was only like 7 or something, but the snow was basically at one point it was as tall as me or something. So it's insane the winters in eastern Siberia. But okay, so not paying much attention to Trump. What about on the Ukrainian front? What do you think there could be any shifts there, or it doesn't matter so much? They're just waiting and holding out for Trump.
First of all, I think there's going to be a development in Russia, in Kursk province, because Ukrainians occupying, not half, but a part of Kursk province is like a thong for Putin and his government, and they need to push the Ukrainians back, but they have not been able to do that. That is crucial for their hand to negotiate, because if Ukrainians are still occupying Russian territory, that's going to be, huge disadvantage for Putin. And I expect that they're going to use all possible resources to actually try to drive the Ukrainians back to Ukraine. Will they be able to do that? I don't think so. Again, this is just my guess, and this is more of uneducated guess because I'm not a military expert. But from what I'm seeing happening in the Russian army, the commander of the southern bloc changed, the commander of the northern bloc, the V bloc changed, and basically the previous commanders were fired for serious actions. Russian army is not in great shape, far from it. The influx of people have stopped. They're not getting enough new recruits. They keep on upping the bonuses, sign-up bonuses, but still fewer and fewer people signing up. They are forced to take North Koreans. I don't think North Koreans are going to be fighting well in Kursk, and they can't do anything. They've been trying. The Ukrainians are just fantastic there, but the Russians will be trying, and I think that it might be the generals willing to do something pleasant for Putin for New Year. That also is possible in Russia. That's what's going to happen in Russia. In Ukraine, I think that Russians will also be trying to push, not pushing, but trying to push. But I don't think they will succeed much. Nothing extraordinary will happen. They don't have any magical reserves anywhere, all disappear out of the blue and say, okay, now we are to reinforce you. No, Russian army is exhausted. And Ukrainians have ATACMSs and Storm Shadows. And now they can use, and so Russians watch out. So that's what I think is going to happen in the front lines. Answering your question.
No, well, that's I like that sort of watch out, very bluntly put. So there is one. I'm gonna take a couple of questions here for us. One from Michael: could the Russian economy go into hyperinflation at some point realistically? I mean, the rate at which the ruble has been performing to the dollar, the central bank, who I have to admit, the head of the central bank, I forget her name. She's done a remarkable job, just objectively as a technocrat. She's done an incredible job of keeping the ruble. But there was, what was it, last year? When the Russian economy was overheating and the ruble went over 100 to the dollar, and they somehow managed to get it back to around 89, 92, whatever range. But now it's over 100 and it's staying there. So clearly the Russian toolbox is running out of tools to use to push it back down. Whether or not that means it's going to go to hyperinflation, what do you think, Konstantin?
This is not a matter of what I think. This is a fact, okay? This is going to get done. Plain and simple. There's no way around it. Okay. Russia has entered the period of high inflation, and it will turn into hyperinflation. It's also called galloping inflation. Elvira Nabiulina has done a remarkable job, I agree. She had the goal set by Vladimir Putin to keep the inflation, under control. And then she's tried. The thing is, Pyotr, you're an economist, right?
I like to think so. I did my master's in economics. So.
Okay. So, all right. I didn't know what your background was. So, you know that there are two states of economy, two kinds of fiscal policy. You try to extract money from the economy and to freeze them as much as possible, or you try to flood economy with money. Okay. You can't do both at the same time. To take effect, you need to do something like either or. All right. And then what Russia is trying to do right now. Nabiullina has been trying to extract money from Russian economy by increasing the key interest rate. And that usually works in a normal economy. Okay. Inflation gets lower and the prices don't change much. Economy slows down, cools off. But at the same time, Ministry of Finance, Russian government, Russian military industrial complex, at the same time, pumping money, taking money from the savings account, from monetary welfare national fund, and pumping into the military industrial complex, and pumping into sign-up bonuses of soldiers, flooding their families with money unseen before. Okay. And whatever Nabiullina is doing is not very effective, okay? And she's going to raise the interest rate again, but at the same time, Russian central bank has just issued 1 trillion rubles, digital rubles, and lent it to commercial banks with one condition. So the commercial banks will buy Russian government bonds, and that money will be accumulated at the Ministry of Finance, and it'll send the money to finance military industrial complex more. So that she's trying to dry economy out of money at the same time with one hand. And with another hand, she's trying to flood the economy with money. She's flooding. So this is not good, okay? And there are two power groups, Nabiullina and the central bank and the Ministry of Finance, and they've been trying to keep the economy balanced, okay? And then there's another group, the military-industrial complex. And they say, you know what? We don't care about your inflation. We need money, okay? The 21% interest rate is too high. We're working at zero right now. And if we stop working, there will be no tanks, there will be no planes, no missiles, and Russia will lose the war. So, and then Putin chooses them over Nabiullina. And then it's going to take a very short effect. It's going to keep Russia afloat for a few months. But then hyperinflation. Here you go. Knock, knock on the door. And I think what the Putin's point right now is he's betting everything on the negotiations with Trump. Okay? If he succeeds and some kind of ceasefire is achieved, then he will exhale, okay, and then he will start dealing with domestic issues. The military-industrial complex is going to be, the expenses will be lowered, and it will try to stabilize economy. And if Putin does not succeed, then from what I see is like they don't really care much. Their acting is, you know what, that's going to be someone else's problem. They'll have to deal with that. That's the attitude I'm reading at many Russian officials.
No, very goodly, succinctly, and I think expertly put. The central bank, you cannot have two conflicting monetary policies, expansionary and contractionary at the same time. No, well, that's it. Expansionary, you flood the money supply or you cut the money supply, right? You can't do both whilst trying to do one singular movement with the interest rates. It doesn't work. But yeah, no, I did my master's in strategic studies and in international economics. So the study of war to politics, and I was at Johns Hopkins SAIS. So good university, I think. American,
one of the best.
Typical
Yeah,
sort
I
of
know.
tradition.
I know.
It's a good university and one of the best in the world for that sort of stuff. It's very expensive, being a foreigner. But anyway, so no, I like to hope I'm still in tune with my economics, but I think we need to evolve our economic policies. But the other question that I wanted to put to you was, it's a lovely speculative question from Probably Passionate, which is why I thought I'd put it to you, because I know how much you love speculating, Konstantin. What is the optimal outcome for Russia that would produce stable peace? The end of Putin not in the picture, guys. That's my opinion. You can't imagine Russia being stable and in peace without Putin not being there, because the guy doesn't have any intention to stop until he gets what he wants. I don't know if you agree.
Before I answer this question, let me give an overview of Russian economy, so to speak. It's actually very simple to understand what's happening in Russia. Russia is the economy that used to earn most of its profits, let's put it this way, from exporting natural resources, oil and natural gas and metals. That was 48% of Russian budget. That amounted to taxes that came from exporting these natural resources. Russia was saving a lot of money. It did not spend as much as it earned. And then what happened in February? It has lost, over the course of 2 years, let's put it this way, it has lost a great deal of export revenues due to different measures, due to international sanctions, logistical problems and so forth. And at the same time, the amount of expenditures skyrocketed because it started pumping money into the military industrial complex. Take a household, you have a job, you have, you earn money, you spend money. If you earn more than you spend, then you're fine. But imagine you start earning twice as little and you start spending twice as much. What happens to your personal finances? Go bankrupt. Basically, that's what Russia is heading towards right now. And it's almost there. Banks don't give you loans because they don't believe in you. Russia cannot borrow money from anywhere. That's what's happening in the Russian economy. Very primitive overview, okay, but that explains a lot. And then back to the question. Can you put it up on the screen again?
It's largely asking, your favorite thing. What is the optimal outcome for Russia that would produce stable peace? For me, there's no other alternative to, Putin can't be the leader of the country for there to be a stable and peaceful Russia. And to tag on to that, Maria asks, who cares if Russia's stable? Well, I recommend you watch the Peacemaker film with George Clooney and Nicole Kidman.
Oh, yeah, I remember. That's a good one.
Because you don't want a stateless country of Russia with 1,500 active nuclear warheads available to stateless and non-state actors and, anarchist groups. So I have
an anecdote on that. I have an anecdote on that movie. The movie was about a radical guy he bought a nuclear bomb, a small one, and put it in a backpack, and he wanted to detonate it in New York, and then they were chasing after the guy. So there's an anecdote. Russians invented a small nuclear bomb that can fit into a suitcase. Well, but they couldn't do anything with it for one simple reason. They didn't know how to build a suitcase. So
I've heard something similar.
I agree with you. That's definitely a scenario, and Russia needs to be stable just for this one simple reason: to keep the nuclear weapons under control. Will it stay stable? We don't know. Will it fall apart? There's a good chance, but again, it depends on circumstances, different scenarios. But that question keeps disappearing. I wanted to answer that.
Well, that's largely what we're already talking about it.
what is the
What would
optimal
be the
outcome
optimal
for Russia that would produce stable peace? This is, you know what, this is actually, it's not an easy question. An optimal outcome for Russia that would produce stable peace and long-lasting peace is Russian people need to wake up. They need to realize that the country belongs to them. Their lives, their own lives, and no one else can, except for themselves, can decide for them what to do, how to govern the country, what laws to create, what constitution to create, and so forth. That's the prerogative of Russian people. And once they realize that, once they have this in their hearts, things in Russia will change. Russia has not been stable and peaceful for past 400 years, okay? But sooner or later, Russians must wake up. And once they realize that they are, we are the people, once they understand this concept, then there will be a long-lasting and stable peace in Russia. Until that, it doesn't matter. Putin goes, in place of him, another strongman, comes in. This is a possibility, all right? What happens next? We don't know. There are different outcomes, but again, we'll be guessing good, bad, or worse. Because when you have power accumulated in the hands of one strong man or a group and people have no say, bad things happen. So I think, answering the question, I think the optimal outcome for Russia is Russian people realizing who they are, their true power. It's their country. It's not the governments. It's not the Siloviki. It's them. They're the voters. They're the taxpayers. And only then this is the stable peace will come.
My only concern with that is that it's been proven. I think this was Jason who said it, or someone else. We had a guest on. Well, I've had lots of guests on about it, but that sort of Russians don't actually care who governs them as long as their life doesn't change too much. So sort of they were using, my guest was referring to Kursk and sort of saying that, were there with this scenario where Ukraine decided to annex Kursk, which they don't want to do. It's not the same sort of meaning to them. And the Russians wouldn't actually give a shit if they were part of Kursk, Ukraine or Belarus. They wouldn't really care as long as their life doesn't change. So you think that Russians need to be more mobilized and motivated to be, because the Russians are patriotic, but at the same time they sort of aren't to the point where they want to see their country have a different leader, for example. I find Russian citizens to be quite a mixture. I don't know if you have that sentiment sometimes, but so they're incredibly patriotic, but at the same time, if things are okay, if life is pretty okay, then they're not going to try to do too much to change it.
Can you please define patriotic? You keep saying they are very patriotic. What is that? Like, what is patriotism to you? How are they patriotic?
God save our great. No. It depends. I think because they fight for their country, but do they fight for their country based on honest reasons or ones that have been passed to them through manipulation and propaganda? We're getting into
How do they fight? How do they fight for their country, for Russia? When exactly and how?
Well, in World War II.
World War II, yes. There a lot of people were, they were fighting the enemy that invaded their land, that killed their relatives, that, basically attacked the country. That's one thing. And at the same time, even then, not everyone was defending their own country, because do you know anything about Zagranatriady? I know from the first hands, because my grandfather told me, he witnessed it himself. There was a lot of KGB people going after the soldiers, and if someone would turn back, they would just shoot them. And they would shoot people just in case for everyone to see around, and not to make them more patriotic. Okay, so to some degree, I agree. They did fight in World War II, but after World War II, what happened? In Ukraine, how Russians are fighting patriotically in Ukraine? For what? Against who? Against Ukrainians? What did Ukrainians do to them?
No,
Where's
the
the patriotism?
war in Ukraine is a war of conquest. We know what the war in Ukraine is. It's not a war of. Yeah,
I
but
honestly,
I'm saying,
well, my personal opinion, I have not seen many patriotic Russians.
Well, there's a comment here from where is it? The Swede. That's ironic. The Swede, not patriotic but tribalistic. What about that? I feel that's a little bit of a simplistic, because I think Russians are more intelligent than just simply tribalistic. But well, some Russians, but you don't.
Well, you know what? The truth is somewhere in the middle, I think. But I would agree that a lot of Russians are tribalistic. Yes. And then Russia is a very large country with many cultures and many people. It's called Russia, but if you look, it's Tatarstan, Chechnya, Bashkortostan, Yakutia, and if you call anyone, any persons there Russian, they will be very upset at you. They don't speak Russian there, although Russian is a national language. They speak their own languages, and how they are patriotic, what they are fighting for. Take what has been happening in Bashkortostan in the last 18 months, uprisings. That's a very complicated situation. So I think that somewhere in the middle. Of course, no one likes when they invade your country.
Are they tribalistic patriots, or are they?
No. It's not. You can't say that there. Patriotic tribalists, but more closer to tribalists. Okay. Russian culture is closer to the east than to the west, in my opinion.
Oh, I'm not sure I agree with you there. Peter the Great's tour of Europe in the early 1700s to build St. Petersburg based on Amsterdam and Copenhagen and Paris. I think Russia is a huge mixture of. I mean, look what the Grand Duchy of Muscovy did with the Orthodox Church, right, to save it when the Byzantine Empire was going down. What I do find interesting about Ivan the Terrible is that in Russian it's not really the terrible, it's Ivan the Incredible is the closest definition I could find in English, because incredible can mean that you did incredibly good things like creating the state of Russia, but also incredibly bad things, the way that Ivan treated his citizens. But the move east to take much of Siberia was largely never, there's no one inhabiting it apart from some Eskimos or something. So Russia didn't really have much of a resistance. And so there's never been, I think, much of a blend between Eastern and Western, whether or not you think there are Western cultural and historical existences in Russia. There's never been much of a blend there. So because of this, Russia is a weird concoction of all sorts of things. And therefore, there's not really a clearly defined identity. Is that something?
I understand where you're coming from, but let me give you a personal example. Okay, I was born and raised in Russia, and in Russia there's a saying: "Один в поле не воин," means you're nobody without a tribe. In the field, one person doesn't stand against the army. And I was growing up. I went to school, and then I came to the United States of America, and I found a completely different culture. I found a culture of self-made people. You didn't have to be born a part of a noble family, royal family, rich family to actually succeed. Everyone had an opportunity. All you had to do is to learn, to work hard, and that's pretty much it. And I loved it. I started working at a hotel, a very small hotel, and I started sweeping parking lot. And I was making very good money, much more money than my parents were making back in Russia, back in '96. And then I grew into the manager, general manager, managing a few hotels within 1 year. Okay, and I didn't know anyone. I was the army of one, the army of Konstantin, and I worked, and I gave results to the owners, that the family that owned the hotels. So I came to Russia in 1 year, and I started talking to everyone, my friends, people at my university, and everyone loved hearing stories about America. And they asked me, how do you manage to live there? And I told them I started working at the hotels. I said, wait a second. You're 21 years old. You came without language. You came without connections. You came from, you're nobody in America. Nobody. You are you're less than a speck of dust. And you made the manager. How many employees do you have? I said, well, about 30. We don't believe you. You're lying. I said, I'm not lying. Why? Because it's simply impossible. You have to know people. People have to make you. Did you marry someone? I said, no, I'm not married. Do you date owner's daughter or something? So you see, people in Russia couldn't understand that one man could advance by himself, not being a part of the tribe, a part of the group, because in Russia it's completely different. If you know someone, if you're born, if you're friends with someone, then they promote you, they help you. Not just one or two people, the entire group, the entire tribe, clan. It's not tribe, but it's a clan. Russia is a country of clans up to this day. Uzbekistan is much stronger culture of clans. But Russia is closer to Uzbekistan than to the West, okay? And this is what I mean. Russia is closer to the East than to the West, just in this clan society, in tribalism.
Clans is a good way to put it. I think that there is definitely a lack of uniformity, if that's the right word, in Russia. You have 70% of the population that lives within the western part, west of the Ural Mountains, and then the eastern part. I mean, it's very, very well. You have military outposts because that's how the Russians started expanding. And then when the Soviets finally started conducting some of their first censuses, to measure the demographics of the country, it became really, I really encourage people to read into Russian history, or that expansion of it, because it's really fascinating how the country has sort of formed. And really, one of my undergrad was in geography, and I was always interested in economic geography. And there was a concept called economic agglomeration by a gentleman called Alfred Marshall. And his main point was that over time, you get hubs of certain economic activity. So, for example, in Northern America, you've got the Rust Belt, and that became somewhere that was a big hub for manufacturing based on specifically the car industry or heavy goods vehicles or something like that. In Russia, though, the economic geography of it is incredibly disjointed. Geography is not on Russia's side because it's so big, and because the weather in the north makes it largely uninhabitable. Of course, people do live up there for, oil and other natural resource reasons. It makes it incredibly difficult to build the country in a comprehensive, effective way. One of the reasons why sort of America has done relatively well is because you've got a seaboard either side. There's no country to the north or the south or the west or the east that can threaten America. Russia has always been, what it perceives to be threatened by the West, risks underneath and to the east. And then you tag on to the security concerns, the lack of economic integration like that. The railroads are very limited. The roads are very sparse. So Russia's never really been able to build through economic, because once you build economics and civilizational settlements, then you build culture, you build communication, and therefore a collective identity. But they've struggled to do that. So yeah, I don't know if what I'm saying it makes sense, but it's unless Russia can get its act together in terms of because if Putin stops spending money on foreign wars, I know that rich coming from the West, but it focuses on domestic issues and integrating the country more, Russia could be one of the wealthiest countries in the world, right? Not 1.2 billion or whatever the heck the GDP is right now. It could be worth so much more, let alone its resource abundancy, right? So you really got me into this now.
The entire, I know. It's when it becomes an area of your expertise, you kind of get carried away. Not just you, but like me too. Russia is There's a fundamental problem, and you're right. It started with Ivan the Terrible, or I don't call him the Magnificent or whatever. He's the first Tsar that has built the vertical of power. And the only time that the vertical of power did not exist was from 1991 to 2004. Okay.
Right.
Putin built his own vertical of power. And basically, vertical of power changes the economy. It's not a free economy, okay, because vertical of power ensures one man to keep the absolute power in his hands. And this entire a huge group of people serving him and protecting his power. In return, they get a lot of power to use anywhere they want to, okay, to earn riches. And this is not free market economy, okay. There are no rules. Free market economies, well, I'm not telling it to you. I'm more telling it to viewers. Is the environment where there's competition with many players, everyone is equal, and everyone is playing by the same rules. In Russia, that is not the case. Business people trying to do business, and all of a sudden, KGB captain comes and says, "Look, I really like your business. Why don't you sell me for? I'll give it to you a lot of money, $100. And if you don't sell, you find yourself in prison." I've seen that happen many, many times before. Now it's complete lawlessness. Okay, and Russia cannot thrive. Russian economy cannot thrive with this system. Okay, even if they apply economic policies, it's crooked, it's fixed. That is the fundamental problem. And that's what I'm saying. In order for Russians to actually, Russia is one of the richest countries in the world, resource-wise. Okay, and they certainly can shine economically. Just imagine, Putin stashed $600 billion into the war chest, into this national welfare fund, and Russia is still using it 2.5 years into the war. Imagine, and half of it was frozen, has been frozen in Europe. Okay, imagine if that amount of money put into the Russian economy to build infrastructure, to build, to promote businesses, to support economic policies, for the economy to grow. Dubai, forget about it. These countries that are growing fast. The tallest building in the world would be in Russia if that money would reach the right destination. But there's no point of doing that, because there's a different goal that Vladimir Putin and his friends have. There's a vertical of power, and everyone has a certain fixed place in that vertical of power. Okay, it's keep the power of the Tsar, serve the Tsar, and do what else you want to do. You will not be prosecuted because you serve the Tsar well. That's it.
Yeah, and I think it's really sad, because I would love Russia to be more of a international player than it is. People will say, well, they hosted the BRICS and that, but I would love to see Russia reach its full potential, which it doesn't, because I feel that there could be. But, with Putin in power, the mafia state, the clan structured system, as you called it, these things are very sad. It's what there was a book written a couple of years in 2012. I remember reading it, about why nations fail. It was written by a couple of very known economists from, I think, Harvard or Yale. And their main emphasis was that there are two types of systems: inclusive and extractive. And Russia is an example of an extractive system, whereby the elites, and particularly in this case, Putin and his inner circles, have extracted the money, the resources and everything, and purged anyone who might even be remotely a bit of an opposition from them. And, Russia has all the potential, and people are like, oh, it's a massive economy, they're going to defeat Europe and this, that, the other. Yeah, sure. They're bigger than Guatemala, but this is Russia. It should be 10 times the size. not 1.5 billion. It should be up there with the Indian economy at like 4, Germany at least, right? It's insane.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. You know what? I started laughing when you said that some people think, well, look at BRICS and Russia hosting BRICS. And I've heard so much about it. And this is a laughing stock because Russia is trying to play the geopolitical leader. And then, and somehow, look, we are hosting everyone in Kazan. Look, everyone is here. The Chinese president, the Turkish president, and the good example, Turkish president goes to summit in Kazan, and then 2 months later, he just takes Syria, and then he just announced he wants to annex Syria and make it, because historically it's Turkish land. Okay, and this is what shows you what this BRICS system and BRICS summit is much ado about nothing. And I don't look at the talk. Talk is cheap. I look at the work. What has been achieved out of this BRICS, except for the name, except for the meetings? And do you know that there's like an interplanetary committee of BRICS countries, and they're trying to send Sputniks and
oh no,
yeah, they get paid.
We've lost Konstantin for a second. Konstantin, have we lost Konstantin? I can't hear him. Is the stream, guys? Can you still hear us? Is the stream still going? I can't see Konstantin. Also, just to be clear, oh, you're back. Are you here, Konstantin? You disappeared. Okay, so the stream's still going. He froze. Crap. That's the problem with Uzbekistan as developing as it is. It's still got mixed internet. This is, well, yeah, guys. It's. I would like. Ah, shit, we lost him. Well, okay. I'll continue. I'm not as smooth as Konstantin yet in adjusting to technical issues, but this is unfortunately just water at the moment. I am going to a Christmas party after. Well, I'm meant to be there now, but I'm having such an interesting conversation with Konstantin. We will definitely be having to do this again about, well, it's such an interesting conversation about Russia that I don't really want to end it yet. We said we'd go for an hour, but another 42 minutes in, and here we are. So, but yeah, no, I think what Konstantin is saying is that it's incredibly difficult to see how Russia can really do that with its current system in place. And you have to have a massive, well, this is where I was going to go with it after he'd made his point, which is that you have to have a very clear, defined sort of post-leader, be it in this case post-Putin pathway forward. The reason why I have higher hopes for Belarus, for example, is because there is a clear alternative government or group of people who are outside of the country who could take over were Lukashenko to be ousted or kick the bucket or something, or overthrown by his people. In Russia, Putin has done such an effective job of keeping people in power, himself in power, and purging his immediate circles that he's not able. It's very difficult to see who would do that. You know, a lot of people talk about Garry Kasparov, for example, names like that, but there isn't a clearly defined set of people who could do that. So I do worry about that. And also because Russia has, I think the events in the 90s, when the Russian economy was trying to shift from market state economy to market, free market economic system, was shock therapy. I remember doing a course at my university about the differences of shock therapy, which was done by the Russians, and gradualism, which was done by the Chinese. And gradualism was much more smooth and has allowed the Chinese to really benefit, while shock therapy is, I think, a critical aspect of why the Russian economy is struggling as much as it is, aside from Putin's decisions to make to do what he does. Konstantin, you are back. I was ad-libbing, and I think I got away with it, not as smoothly as you, but yeah.
Well, I tell you what,
Pyotr, I wasn't very smooth because I was caught surprised. I've never seen a situation where host disappeared. You know?
True. Well, I thought you did a good job, but anyway. So I think because we said we were going to wrap up and then we carried on for another 45 minutes. And I was saying to everybody,
all right, let's just finish what I was saying about the BRICS, and that's it. I'll be done.
Well, I don't want you to be
I was
done.
saying that
I'm getting through my bottle of vodka here, which is unfortunately just water. But yeah, No, I don't want you to be done. I just
English breakfast. I unfortunately don't drink, but I would have had a toast for you. But my drinking days are over. I'm too old for that.
Okay, no, fair enough. But yeah, go for it. Finish what you're saying about BRICS. I love BRICS. It's
BRICS does not have one policy that would unite the economies of all countries that are part of BRICS. Moreover, there are trade wars going on between the BRICS countries. The Chinese banks are not refusing Russian payments. You cannot make any payment to a Chinese bank. Turkey has officially refused created a blacklist for so many categories of products to be imported to Russia. And BRICS countries are not friends, okay? Argentina refused to enter to join BRICS, and Putin announced at that meeting in Kazan at the forum. He showed it was a very funny moment. He showed a possible design of a possible new currency, BRICS currency, one brick, okay? And Russian propaganda was so excited about that. But the thing is, it's just the design, it's just a piece of paper. No one wants the currency. And the Indian, I think it was Minister of Finance a few days ago, came out and said that no matter what other countries and their politicians say, BRICS are not going to have no plans on establishing own currency, and India is definitely not going to take a part of it. Okay, so BRICS is just a talk. That's all. And then a lot of people in Russia get excited and they say, well, look at Russia is behind the BRICS. Look how great BRICS is. Very powerful countries. Half of the world's economies, if you combine China, India, and Russia, it's mostly about China and India. So what? This is a decoy for local problems, domestic problems that Russia have. That is something that they're selling Russian people, and they're trying to sell all over the world. But they're selling it to Russians, but they definitely not selling it to the world. So every time I hear someone says in Russia, "Oh, look at BRICS, look what the success the BRICS Russia has achieved with the BRICS," I can't stop laughing.
Well, I'm glad to know how much we are in agreement on that. I am much like yourself in what you've referenced in your personal roles and stuff. I'm currently in the process of maybe starting a new one as of next year, and I'm sort of here in the UK and beginning to think that maybe I should do a PhD. And the PhD subject that I'm increasingly rather interested in is sort of world order, but specifically in the areas of sort of non-state actors versus nation states, and in this case using BRICS as a case study, because BRICS is fascinating for me. It's more like China and co, right? China has put up more than, I think, 50% of the current funding that is in the New Development Bank, which they founded in 2015. But the overall funding for the NDB is 100 million, right? Or is it 100 billion? No, yeah, it's 100 million, right? Or whatever. It's finite. That's
Something
how
like that,
much. Yeah. That's how much the World Bank spends in 1 quarter. So 1 quarter of a year on a few projects. So for the World Bank to be genuinely, I don't know, not threatened, but in competition with an alternative non-Western entity dominated or led by the BRICS, guys, you're gonna have to start upping your finances. BRICS has never dealt or delivered anything of tangible policy at all. This whole idea of CBDCs or some kind of centralized single currency, right? A shared currency via fiat money. The reason the euro works is because it's one, well, apart from the nation states all having a similar ideology and them being mainly democracies, is because it's geography. How are you going to manage a singular physical currency from Brazil to Moscow? It's not easy. Well, how are you going to do this? Yeah, so it's BRICS has potential, but the main thing BRICS has potential is in what it stands for symbolically, which is a antipathy, as I used that word earlier, for the Western US dollar dominance, right? That's what it's mainly about. When people jump onto the idea of BRICS, it's because they are very anti the US, so people who are hate Israel or hate the US tend to be people who are strong believers in BRICS. I'm not saying it's an immediate correlation, but there tends to be a lot of people who I've had engagements with on Twitter tend to be people who hold these mutual viewpoints. But BRICS is it's a joke. It's not. I'm not saying it can't have a potential, but and also and last point, and I welcome any final thoughts from you on this, is the bigger it gets, the more voices you have to consider. Right. The reason why the UN is a problem is because it's so big and we've got 195 nations trying to do stuff. BRICS works kind of because there's only 5 of them. Now we've got 11, 2 of which don't really like each other, namely the Saudis and the Iranians. So the more voices you add, is that going to simplify and streamline the economic bloc? I don't think so. So anyway, what do you think?
Hangout club. It's a hangout club with members that some of them don't like each other. That's how it can be described. Hangout. You hang out there. If you want, you can show up and see others and drink and eat and but not one tangible economic policy. And then you judge by a union or organization or a group by the policies, by the actions. No actions, no policies.
Yeah, no, and I think the last point is people talk. Well, you need a reverse currency or a reserve currency. Excuse me. Well, let's be honest. It's not going to be the ruble. None of the other countries have it. What? So it's going to be the renminbi? Well, the renminbi accounts for about 2.5% of all international financial flows right now, and it's never been higher than 2.9%. Reuters actually, I remember reading an article earlier in the year, and it was saying that it had gone down by more than 30%. So it had gone back down to 2% of overall exchanges. So, and also because the Chinese, they lack one fundamental thing, which is they don't have an open capital account. If you don't have an open capital account, how can you trade as the alternative reserve currency for the BRICS? It's not physically possible. Anyway,
it's not possible.
No. Anyway, we've spoken for almost 2 hours. Konstantin, it is really a pleasure. I might splice some of these conversational bits we had into sort of some video because I really love this conversation about, well, BRICS, but also the historical and sort of cultural, psychological bits of Russia. I thought that was really fascinating. So I can't wait to do it again with you. Really appreciate you spending so much of your time. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Do you have any final thoughts, Konstantin? Anything you've got coming up you want to share with people?
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I like this conversation because, I usually am one-man show and I give my point of view. But this time, it's actually a dialogue and you turn me into a little different direction. Kind of expand the horizon a little bit. I like it.
Oh. What did I expand your horizons on? I'm very honored to have done that with the
American politics. I usually don't discuss it, don't talk about it. I'm not an expert on the front lines, what's going on in Ukraine, military-wise, things like that. So that's interesting. That's refreshing.
Yeah, it was very refreshing. But thank you, guys. I've thank you, everyone. Again, it is definitely vodka. Absolutely. Thanks, Erin. Yes, Konstantin will be back. I'm just trying to pick out some. We had very clever questions and very clever answers. So there's that. And then this one, I think, is obviously very important. that I apparently am a troll. Where is it? I can't find it. Oh, there we go. Pyotr drinking straight vodka from the bottle. Good lad. Yes, thank you, Tachion. I am making up for Konstantin's lack of drinking. And obviously, where is it? This one. Thanks, Larry. So everyone, if you enjoyed it, then do check out some of the videos on the channel and subscribe if you liked chatting with Konstantin. But we'll be back.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
And have a good evening, everyone. And if I don't see you before, happy Christmas. Bye. All right.